The first time I saw my daughter after she disappeared, she was standing beneath the fluorescent lights of a grocery store, trying to buy a can of baby formula with a bank card that no longer worked. I almost walked past her. That is the part one still can't forgive myself for. Not because I didn't recognize her. Because for one terrible second, I didn't recognize the woman she'd become. She was too thin. Her hair was pulled back carelessly. Her gray sweater hung from her shoulders like it belonged to someone else. And in her arms was a 4-month-old baby I had never seen before. My granddaughter. I had been looking for Clara for 6 weeks. I just didn't know I was looking for her. The room at the Harbor View Inn in Myrtle Cove, South Carolina, had been too quiet that night. I'd stayed in hundreds of hotel rooms over 30 years. King-sized bed, crisp white sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows, a minibar stocked with things I rarely touched. Usually, hotel rooms were where I worked. I answered emails, took calls, reviewed financial reports, slept 4 or 5 hours, got up before sunrise and did it all again. At 62, I had become very good at living out of a suitcase. But that night, I couldn't concentrate. I stood at the window with my hands in my pockets and stared at the black Atlantic beyond the glass. 3 weeks earlier, my financial analyst had found something strange. A company called Coastal Meridian LLC had started purchasing commercial property along the South Carolina shoreline. Nothing unusual about that by itself. What was unusual was the pattern. Small purchases, carefully timed, never enough to attract attention. Then another company would appear. Then another. Different names, different addresses, different registered agents. But the money eventually led back to the same place. The Belmont family. New York. Victoria Belmont. The woman who had sat across from me at a Manhattan dinner 18 months earlier and told me she thought of my daughter as her own. The woman who had looked me directly in the eyes 3 weeks before and told me Clara was resting at a private wellness retreat. No visitors. No outside contact. 60 days. Victoria had even sent me a letter supposedly written by Clara. I knew my daughter's handwriting. The letter wasn't hers. I told myself there had to be an explanation. I told myself Clara was an adult. She had married Julian Belmont. She had built a life. I didn't want to become the father who mistook concern for control. So I waited. Then I waited some more. But every morning I woke up with the same feeling in my stomach. Something was wrong. And at 62, I'd learned one thing the hard way. You can ignore facts. You can rationalize circumstances. You can talk yourself out of almost anything. But you should never ignore the feeling that something you love is in danger. So I came to South Carolina. Not because I had proof. Because I had a feeling. That night, I needed antacids. And something cold to drink. The grocery store was 2 blocks from the hotel. Henderson's Market looked like it had been there longer than most of the surrounding buildings. The sign outside was missing the letter E. The automatic doors stuttered every time they opened. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A country song played through an old speaker system, cutting in and out every few seconds. I grabbed a bottle of sparkling water. Then I heard a baby crying. I stopped. It wasn't the soft, tired cry of a baby who wanted to be held. It was sharp, desperate, the kind of cry that comes from a child who has been hungry for too long. Underneath it, I heard a woman's voice. Low, trembling. Please. I turned. Can you try it one more time? The woman was standing at the register. I know it should work. The cashier shook her head. Honey, I ran it twice. I checked the account this morning. I'm sorry. The woman looked down at the card in her hand. It had money on it. I believe you. I checked. I know. The cashier's voice softened. But it's declining. The woman swallowed. Then I saw her face. The bottle slipped from my hand. It hit the floor and shattered. Clara looked at me. For a second, neither of us moved. Her lips parted. Her eyes widened. Then she whispered the word I had been waiting 6 weeks to hear. Dad. I crossed the store in 4 steps. I put my arms around her. She collapsed against me. The baby between us startled and began crying harder. Clara was shaking. Not from the cold. Not from exhaustion. From the kind of trembling that happens when someone has been holding themselves together for so long that the moment they're finally safe, their body doesn't know what else to do. I've got you, I whispered. She pressed her face against my shoulder. I've got you, Clara. She made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not quite a sob. Something deeper. Something broken. I loosened my arms and looked at her. She was so thin. That was what frightened me most. I'd seen Clara tired. I'd seen her sick. I'd seen her angry. I'd seen her heartbroken. but I'd never seen her look hollow. "Where's your baby?" She looked down. The infant was still crying against her shoulder. "Her name is Lily." My throat tightened. "Lily." Clara nodded. "She was born in August." August. I'd spent August in New York, September in Chicago, October in meetings and airports, while my daughter had given birth to a child I didn't know existed. "Let me hold her." Clara hesitated. It was barely a second, but I noticed. That hesitation told me more than any explanation could have. She had learned that she was the only person her child could depend on. Slowly, she transferred the baby into my arms. Lily was tiny, too tiny. She stopped crying almost immediately. I looked down at her. My granddaughter. My first grandchild. And the first thought that entered my mind wasn't joy. It was shame. I should have known. I looked at Clara. "How long have you been here?" "About a month." "Where are you staying?" She didn't answer. I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. She looked toward the doors. "Come with me." "Where?" "Just come with me." She picked up the canvas bag beside her. Then she looked at me. "But Dad." "Yes. When you see where we've been staying." She swallowed. "I need you to hold it together." I looked at Lily. "Why?" "Because Lily watches everything." Her voice became almost a whisper. "And if you look scared, she'll know." I nodded. "I'll hold it together." I meant it. At least I thought I did. We left the grocery store. The November wind coming off the Atlantic was sharp enough to cut through my coat. Clara walked quickly. I followed. Lily slept in my arms. We passed 2 empty lots. Then a fenced construction site. Then Clara stopped. She pulled a cheap flashlight from her bag. The building ahead wasn't really a building. It was a construction project that had been abandoned halfway through. Concrete pillars. No walls. No windows. No doors. Open to the wind. Grass had grown through cracks in the concrete. A section of temporary fencing had fallen over. Clara ducked through the opening. I followed. She walked toward the far corner. Then she pointed the flashlight down. 2 pieces of cardboard, layered together. A sleeping bag. The zipper was broken. 2 clean baby onesies folded neatly beside it. A half-empty package of diapers. A small plastic bag containing crackers and a granola bar. And underneath everything, a flattened garbage bag. For waterproofing. I stared at it. My granddaughter had been sleeping there. On cardboard. On concrete. Inside a building with no walls. For 31 days. I touched the floor. Cold. Damp. I looked at Clara. "How did you eat?" "There's a soup kitchen. Every day. 5 days a week." "And the other 2? "Sometimes the church leaves food outside." She tried to make it sound normal. That nearly broke me. I looked at the sleeping bag. Then at Lily. Then back at my daughter. "Why didn't you call me?" Clara's eyes filled. "I tried. When? Before they took my phone." My jaw tightened. "Who?" She looked away. "Julian." I said nothing. She reached into the canvas bag. Her fingers closed around something. A small object wrapped in cloth. She held it against her chest. "I've been carrying this since the night they brought me here." "What is it?" "Evidence." She looked at me. "I'll tell you everything." "Now." "Not here." She glanced at Lily. "I need to be somewhere safe first." I nodded. "We're leaving." She looked back at the cardboard. "What about our things?" I shook my head. "Leave them." "But, Clara." She looked at me. "We're not coming back for any of it." Her chin lifted. "The bag comes with me." I almost smiled. "Then the bag comes with us." She nodded. We walked out together. For the first time in 6 weeks, my daughter wasn't walking alone. And I had no idea that finding her was only the beginning. Because what had happened to Clara wasn't simply a family betrayal. It wasn't just a bad marriage. And it wasn't just about money. Someone had spent years building a plan around my family. And my daughter had accidentally discovered the one thing they were willing to destroy everything to keep hidden. By the time we reached the car, I knew one thing. I was going to find out what it was. No matter who stood in my way. The coastal house was 40 minutes away. For most of the drive, Clara said nothing. She sat in the back seat with Lily against her chest, watching the dark highway through the window. Every few minutes, she looked down to make sure the baby was breathing. I understood why. When you've spent weeks believing the world can take everything from you, you stop trusting silence. I called Eleanor before we reached the house. She had managed our family home for 34 years. She had been there through my wife's illness, through Clara's childhood, through every holiday and family argument and celebration that mattered. I didn't explain much. "I have Clara with me," I said. There was silence on the other end. Then Eleanor asked quietly, "Is she safe?" "Yes." And the baby? Safe. Another pause. How old? For months. Eleanor inhaled sharply. Her name? Lily. When I arrived at the house, Eleanor was already waiting on the porch. The motion lights came on as we turned through the gate. Clara looked up. For a second, she simply stared. The house was warm. The windows glowed golden against the darkness. There was smoke rising from the chimney. She had spent 31 nights in an unfinished concrete building. Now she was looking at a home she had known since childhood. Her shoulders dropped. Just a little. Eleanor came down the steps. She looked at Clara, then at the baby, then back at Clara. My girl. That was all she managed. Clara started crying. Eleanor pulled her into her arms. You are absolutely not okay, she whispered. Clara laughed through her tears. But you will be. She looked at Lily. Now let me see that baby. Inside, everything was ready. A warm bath, clean clothes, a proper bed, a bottle waiting in the kitchen, chicken broth simmering on the stove. Clara sat at the island and fed Lily. I watched from the doorway. For the first time since I had found her, my daughter looked almost peaceful. Not happy, not yet, but peaceful. And I realized how much I had forgotten what my daughter looked like when she wasn't afraid. I walked into the study, closed the door, pulled out my phone. Julian Belmont's number was still there. I stared at it. My first instinct was to call, demand answers, threaten him, tell him exactly what I had found. But anger is useful only if you control it. So I turned the phone face down. Not yet. I needed facts. I called my private investigator. Get to Myrtle Cove by morning. What's happened? I found my daughter. Silence. Then, she's alive. Yes. And the baby? Alive. Who has her? I do. His voice changed. What do you need? Everything on Julian Belmont. I paused. Everything on Victoria. Another pause. And one more name. Who? Ray Morrow. The former federal agent. I want to know who hired him. I hung up. The next morning, Clara sat across from me at the kitchen table. She had showered. Her hair was still damp. She wore an old sweatshirt of mine that she had found in a closet. Lily slept in a bassinet beside her. There was a plate of eggs in front of Clara. She was actually eating. Slowly, but eating. That alone felt like a victory. I waited until she finished. Then I asked the question I had been afraid to ask. What happened? Clara stared at the table. Julian wasn't cruel in the way people imagine. I waited. He was controlling. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. He decided what I knew. What I saw. Who I spoke to. What I spent. Where I went. She looked at me. At first, I thought it was marriage. Then she shook her head. It wasn't. She took a breath. When I was 6 months pregnant, I found something. What? Julian's spreadsheet. His business records? Not exactly. She looked toward the hallway. He had 2 monitors in his office. I went in looking for a charger. One screen was open. I recognized the numbers immediately. Clara had a business degree. She knew finance. She knew what she was looking at. Layering, she said. Money moving through multiple accounts to make the original source difficult to trace. I leaned back. How much? I don't know. Millions. Probably. She had taken 3 screenshots. Then she closed the window. Exactly as she'd found it. Why didn't you confront him? Because I was pregnant. Her voice was quiet. And because I knew something was wrong. She began looking deeper. Companies she'd never heard of. Transfers. Names that appeared nowhere in official Belmont documents. Then she found Coastal Meridian LLC. I felt the room change. You're sure? Yes. How did you know? Because Julian's name wasn't on it. She looked at me. But his mother's fingerprints were everywhere. Victoria Belmont. My stomach tightened. What were they buying? Commercial property. Where? Along the South Carolina coast. I thought about the report that had brought me to Myrtle Cove. That's why they brought you here. Clara nodded. I think so. I waited. Then what happened? Her expression changed. They wanted a boy. I didn't understand. Who? Victoria. She looked down at Lily. She wanted a grandson. When Lily was born a girl, everything changed. Clara's voice became quieter. They stopped pretending. Within 2 weeks, her passport disappeared. Her joint bank account was altered. Her phone was replaced. She couldn't transfer more than $500 without approval. Who controlled the account? Julian. Your phone. Monitored. I clenched my jaw. Why didn't you leave? I tried. She looked at me. That's when they took me. The night Julian told her they were going to a postpartum appointment, Clara believed him. They drove south. She noticed the direction, asked where they were going. Julian didn't answer. Eventually, he said something that made her blood run cold. The situation has changed. She asked what that meant. He told her she had two choices: cooperate or make things much harder for herself. Clara stared at him. And what did you do? I chose neither. She opened the car door when they stopped and walked away. Just walked. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten him. She took Lily, and she walked. Why didn't he stop you? Clara looked at me. I think he expected me to come back. I understood. He believed fear would do his work for him. But Clara didn't go back. She disappeared into Myrtle Cove. She found the construction site, and she stayed alive. I sat quietly for a moment. Then I asked, "What's in the bag?" Clara looked toward the canvas bag resting near the kitchen door. Something I recorded. My pulse changed. What? I knew they wouldn't believe me. Who? Anyone. She looked down at Lily. So I bought a cheap phone. Cash. No name. No connection to her regular accounts. I put a recording app on it. And waited. For what? For them to say the truth out loud. Before she could explain further, the front door opened. Eleanor appeared. There's someone here. I stood. Who? She looked at me. A man. He says his name is Ray Morrow. My investigator had barely been gone a few hours. And already, the past was walking through my front door. Ray was in his early 50s. Broad shoulders. Gray at the temples. The face of a man who had seen too much and learned not to show it. He held his car keys in one hand. A small detail. But I noticed. Men who keep their keys in their hands want people to understand they are prepared to leave. I invited him inside. We sat across from each other. I didn't offer small talk. You were hired to watch me. Yes. By Victoria Belmont. Through an LLC connected to her. Why? To know what you were doing. I stared at him. Did you report everything? He shook his head. No. Why? He looked at Clara, then at Lily, then back at me. Because I found them first. The room went silent. When, 10 days after I started surveillance. You knew where my daughter was? Yes. And you did nothing? Ray didn't flinch. I watched. My anger rose. You watched my daughter and a newborn live in an open building. I did. Why? He leaned forward. Because I stopped believing my client deserved the information. I said nothing. I've spent most of my career making uncomfortable decisions. He looked at Clara. But I have never filed a false report to help hide a woman and an infant. So you stopped reporting. For days before you found her. Why didn't you help her? His jaw tightened. I should have. That answer surprised me. He didn't defend himself. He admitted it. I thought someone would come looking. He looked directly at me. I was waiting for you. I stared at him. Why me? Because I knew eventually you'd come. He reached inside his jacket, placed a USB drive on the table. I've been investigating the Belmont operation for 11 years. I looked at the drive. What's on it? Financial records, corporate registrations, surveillance, names. Enough to show that what happened to your daughter isn't an isolated event. I picked up the drive. Who are they? Ray's answer was simple. More powerful than you think. I looked at him. Then I suppose it's time I find out exactly how powerful. Ray nodded. That's why I'm here. And for the first time since finding Clara in that grocery store, I understood something. The Belmonts hadn't simply taken my daughter. They had made one serious mistake. They had given me a reason to stop playing defense. At 2:30 the next morning, I was still awake. The house was silent. Clara and Lily were sleeping upstairs. Eleanor had gone to bed hours earlier. Ray had left after midnight, promising to return with additional documents. I sat alone in the study with the USB drive on my desk. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. A small piece of plastic. Nothing impressive. But sometimes the most dangerous things in the world don't look dangerous at all. I plugged it into my laptop. 11 folders appeared. One for each year. Financial records. Corporate registrations. Emails. Property purchases. Surveillance photographs. And one folder simply labeled Notes. I opened it. Ray had written everything in short, unemotional sentences. He separated what he knew from what he suspected. No drama. No exaggeration. That made the information more frightening, not less. By 4 in the morning, I understood the basic structure. The Belmont family had been moving money through layers of companies for years. Coastal Meridian was only one piece. The real objective was larger. Much larger. At 5, I called Marcus Webb in New York. Marcus had been my chief financial analyst for almost a decade. He answered on the third ring. Richard, Wake up. I've been awake. Good. I sent him several documents. Pull every SEC filing connected to Sterling Corp from the last 24 months. Why? Because I think someone is buying us. Silence. Then I heard the sound of a keyboard. How much? I don't know yet. Give me an hour. It took him 53 minutes. My phone rang. Richard. His voice had changed. What did you find? A pattern. Tell me. 14 separate entities. All acquiring Sterling shares. How much? Individually? Less than 5%. Collectively? He paused. 11.3%. I leaned back. Who owns them? That's the problem. They're layered. Investment trusts. LLCs. 2 offshore funds. Keep going. I traced several ownership chains. And they connect to the Belmont family. I closed my eyes. How long have they been buying? Approximately 18 months. I looked at the date. 18 months. That was before Clara married Julian. Before the wedding. Before I had ever suspected anything. When did Clara meet Julian? Marcus checked. About 20 months ago. I said nothing. The timeline was too clean. The relationship had begun. For months later, the share purchases started. Then Clara married into the Belmont family. And while she believed she was building a marriage, they were quietly acquiring pieces of my company. I asked, how much do they need? For control? Yes. 51%. Blocking position? 30. How long to 30 at this rate? 14 months. I stared out the window. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. They were building something patiently, piece by piece, company by company, account by account. And my daughter had been standing directly in the middle of it. I called Ray. He answered immediately. You found it? Yes. 11.3. Yes. I was afraid you'd confirm that. There's more. Always. I told him about the timing. He was quiet. Then he said, Richard, your daughter's marriage wasn't the beginning. What do you mean? I think they had plans for Sterling before Julian ever met Clara. Then why Clara? Access. I understood. My daughter was not the target. She was the door. The thought made my hands go cold. Ray continued. There's something else you need to know. What? I wasn't the only investigator who looked at the Belmonts. Who else? Me. Years ago. What happened? I was working a federal case. Money laundering. Shell companies. Political connections. Then I found something linking them to a larger network. What kind of network? I couldn't prove it. Why? Because every time we got close, someone higher up made the investigation disappear. I looked at the documents on my desk. Who? Ray sighed. I never found out. Before we could continue, Clara appeared in the doorway. She was holding Lily. You're still awake. I closed the laptop. Couldn't sleep. She looked at me. Neither could I. She walked inside. Did you find something? Yes. How bad? I hesitated. Bad. She nodded. I expected that. I looked at Lily. She should be sleeping. She was. Clara sat down. Then I woke up. Why? She stared at the floor. I had a dream. About what? The car. I didn't ask her to explain. I knew. The drive south. The locked doors. The moment she realized Julian wasn't taking her to a doctor. I moved closer. You don't have to talk about it. I know. She looked at me. But I need to tell you something. What? The night they took me, Victoria called Julian. I felt my jaw tighten. From where? I don't know. What did she say? She asked if I had changed my mind. About what? Clara looked at Lily. About giving them the information. What information? Sterling. My stomach tightened. They wanted access to your company? Not just access. She reached into the canvas bag. I think they wanted something specific. She pulled out the small prepaid phone. I recognized it immediately. The phone she told me about. She placed it on the desk. I recorded them. I stared at her. Who? Julian. Victoria. Both. How? I left the phone in Julian's office. When? 2 weeks before they took me. She pressed the screen. One audio file. 43 minutes. My heart began pounding. Did they know? No. She looked at me. That's why they were careless. I glanced at the clock. 14 minutes past 5. We listen now. Clara nodded. She pressed play. At first, there was only room noise. A door closing. Footsteps. Then Victoria's voice. Calm. Measured. She knows too much. Julian answered. She doesn't know everything. She knows enough. A pause. Then Victoria again. You've had 18 months. I know. You were supposed to have access by now. I tried. Trying isn't the same as succeeding. I looked at Clara. She was staring at the phone. The recording continued. Julian's voice became quieter. What if she goes to her father? Victoria answered immediately. She won't. How do you know? Because Richard trusts her. Exactly. She'll protect him. I felt something cold settle in my chest. They had studied us. They knew how we worked. They knew how I thought. They knew how Clara thought. And they'd used that knowledge against both of us. Then Victoria said something that made Clara close her eyes. We don't need her permanently. Silence. Then Julian. What does that mean? It means we need her cooperative. And if she isn't? A pause. Then we make cooperation unnecessary. The recording continued. But I stopped it. Clara looked at me. Why? Because I need to know what else is on there before we hear it. She nodded. I looked at Ray. This goes to federal investigators. Yes. Immediately. Yes. Then my phone rang. Marcus. His voice was urgent. Richard, there's another problem. What? Someone just filed a challenge to your authority as CEO. I stood. Who? 3 board members. On what grounds? Financial misconduct. I looked at Clara. She understood immediately. They're coming after you. Yes. Marcus continued. There's more. What? They've already prepared documents. Against me? Yes. What kind? Transfers from Sterling accounts into private accounts. Are they real? No. He hesitated. But they look real. I understood. The attack wasn't coming from outside. It was already inside the company. Someone had access to our systems. Someone had access to legal documents. Someone knew enough about Sterling to manufacture a believable case against me. I hung up. Ray stood. Martin Cole. I looked at him. Our chief legal counsel? Yes. Why? Because he's been connected to the Belmont operation for years. I didn't want to believe it. Martin had worked for me for 20 years. He had attended my wife's funeral. He had sent flowers when she died. I'd trusted him with everything. Ray opened another folder. There are payments. How much? Almost $3 million. To Martin. Through a Delaware LLC. I stared at the document. Show me. He turned the screen toward me. 6 transfers. Different amounts. Same pattern. Always just below the level that would immediately attract attention. I thought about Clara's marriage contract. Something suddenly bothered me. Who drafted her prenup? Martin. Ray looked at me. Why? Because there was a clause. What clause? Independent legal representation. Mandatory waiting period before major asset transfers. I remembered the final agreement. Those protections weren't there. At the time, I assumed Clara had removed them. Now I wasn't so sure. I called Martin Cole. He answered immediately. Richard. His voice was perfectly calm. I need to see you. Of course. Today. Absolutely. Charleston. Where? I'll send the location. He paused. Is something wrong? I looked at Ray. Then at Clara. That's what I'm trying to find out. I ended the call. Clara stood. What are you going to do? Find out how many people I trusted. She looked at me. And if the answer is more than one? I picked up the folder. Then I'll stop trusting people. I walked toward the door. But before I left, Clara stopped me. Dad. I turned. She looked at me with the same expression she'd had in the grocery store. Tired. Afraid. But no longer alone. Be careful. I nodded. I will. She held Lily closer. And I realized something. The Belmonts had made one mistake when they took my daughter. They had assumed fear would keep her silent. But Clara had spent those 6 weeks doing something they never expected. She had been collecting the truth. And now that truth was beginning to come back for them. Martin Cole arrived exactly on time. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that he looked completely calm. 20 years in corporate law had taught Martin how to walk into difficult rooms without showing what he was feeling. He entered the Charleston office carrying a leather briefcase. Gray suit. Blue tie. No hesitation. Richard. Martin. We shook hands. His grip was firm. Normal. Almost reassuring. Almost. I motioned toward the chair. Sit. He did. I understand this concerns Clara's marriage agreement. It does. He folded his hands over the briefcase. Is Clara all right? The question sounded genuine. That bothered me more than if he'd sounded nervous. She's safe. He nodded. I'm glad. I opened my laptop. Martin, before we discuss the prenup, I want to ask you about some financial records. His expression barely changed. What kind of records? I turned the screen toward him. 6 transfers. Same destination. Different dates. Different amounts. $470,000 was the largest, almost $3 million altogether. The recipient account carried his name, but the money had come through a Delaware LLC connected to the Belmont family. Martin looked at the screen. 3 seconds. 4. Then he leaned back. I can explain that. I expected you could. They were consulting fees. For what? Private financial consulting. Outside Sterling? Yes. Why didn't you disclose them? He gave a small shrug. They were personal matters. You're Sterling's chief legal counsel. I understand. Then you understand why payments from a Belmont-connected company to you might concern me. He looked at me. I wasn't acting for Sterling. Maybe not. I closed the laptop. Let's talk about Clara. His posture changed slightly. What about her? The original prenup contained 2 protections. He waited. Independent legal representation, and a mandatory waiting period before certain asset transfers. He nodded slowly. Yes. Those protections disappeared. They were removed at the client's request. Whose request? Julian's legal team. I stared at him. Julian wasn't your client. No. Clara was. Yes. Then why were you taking instructions from Julian's lawyers? I wasn't. Then explain it. Martin's eyes moved toward the window. I was trying to reach an agreement both sides could accept. Both sides. I leaned forward. Your job was to protect my daughter. He didn't answer. Not Julian. Not Victoria. Clara. His jaw tightened. Then he said, Richard, these matters are complicated. No. I kept my voice quiet. They're not. He looked back at me. You were paid almost $3 million by entities connected to the Belmont family. Those payments are legitimate. You altered my daughter's legal protections. At the client's request. You knew she was being manipulated. I had no evidence of that. You had enough evidence to ask questions. He said nothing. I closed the laptop. Then we'll let federal investigators ask them. For the first time, Martin's composure slipped. Only slightly. But I saw it. His eyes moved toward the door. Then back to me. I don't think that's necessary. I do. He stood. I'd like to consult personal counsel. Of course. He picked up his briefcase. Then stopped. Richard. I looked at him. Whatever you think happened here, I never intended harm to Clara. I believe that he believed it. And somehow that made it worse. Because there are people who commit terrible things out of hatred. And then there are people who do them because they convince themselves they're simply doing business. Martin walked out. I waited 30 seconds. Then called security. Follow him. Do not approach him. Tell me who he contacts. The answer came 20 minutes later. Sir, he made a phone call from his car. Who? We don't know yet. Find out. I returned to the house just before sunset. Clara was sitting on the back porch with Lily. The ocean was visible beyond the trees. For a moment, I didn't tell her about Martin. She deserved one evening without another piece of bad news. Instead, I sat beside her. How are you? She looked at me. That's a dangerous question. I smiled. Why? Because I'm starting to realize I might actually be okay. That was the first time she had said it. I looked at Lily. She's beautiful. Clara smiled. She looks like Mom. I looked at the baby again. She does. We sat quietly. Then Clara said, Dad, yes. What happened to the company? Someone is trying to take control. Because of me? No. She looked at me. Don't say that just because you think I need to hear it. I'm not. I took a breath. They started acquiring shares before you married Julian. She went still. Before. For months before. Her eyes moved to the ocean. So the marriage was part of the plan. She closed her eyes. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, I wasn't a wife. No. What was I? I looked at her. A doorway. The words hurt to say. They hurt her to hear. But sometimes the truth doesn't become less painful because you soften it. Clara pulled Lily closer. Then they never knew me. No. She looked at me. They thought they knew exactly what I would do. And they were wrong. A small smile appeared. Very wrong. That night, I received a message from Ray. They know. I called immediately. Know what? That you're investigating. How? Martin. I stood from my desk. Where is he? Not home. Where? Unknown. Did he contact the Belmonts? Possibly. That's not an answer. Ray was quiet. His phone went dark 43 minutes ago. I looked toward the hallway. Can they reach Clara? That's what I'm trying to determine. I walked upstairs. Clara was asleep. Lily was beside her in the bassinet. For a moment, I stood in the doorway. Then my phone buzzed again. A photograph. No message. The photograph showed Clara, standing outside Henderson's Market, taken from across the street. The date stamp was from 2 days earlier. Before I found her, my stomach dropped. Ray had warned me. Someone had been watching her. And now I understood why. They hadn't simply lost Clara. They had been searching for her. I called Ray. Get to the house. I'm already moving. How long? 20 minutes. Make it 10. I hung up. Then I woke Clara. She opened her eyes immediately. What happened? I showed her the photograph. The color drained from her face. Where did they get this? I don't know. She sat up. That was the grocery store. I know. I went there almost every night. Why? Formula. I looked at Lily. Did you ever notice anyone? No. She thought. Then shook her head. Wait. What? There was a car. What kind? Black SUV. Did you see the driver? No. How often? 3 times. My heart sank. Same car. I think so. I called security. Locked the property down. Nobody in or out without my approval. Clara looked at me. Dad, I'm not taking chances. She nodded. Then she whispered. They know I'm alive. Yes. And they know you're helping me. Yes. She looked at Lily. What happens now? I answered honestly. Now we stop reacting. We make them react. The next morning, Ray brought a second file. He placed it on the table. This is the part one didn't want to show you until I was sure. What is it? Property records. I opened the file. Coastal Meridian had purchased more than commercial property. There were parcels adjacent to shipping facilities, warehouses, private docks, several properties near infrastructure critical to the regional economy. I looked at Ray. This isn't just about money laundering. No. What are they building? We don't know. I turned another page. One property had been purchased only 3 months earlier. The buyer was a company I'd never heard of, but the registered agent was the same one used by several Belmont entities. I looked closer. Then I saw something else. A connection to Sterling Corp. One of our subsidiaries had recently entered into a supply agreement involving one of those properties. I felt a chill move through me. They've already entered the company. Ray nodded. From the inside. I closed the file. Then we need to know who helped them. Ray looked at me. We already have a suspect. Martin. Martin. I looked toward the kitchen. Clara was there with Eleanor. Lily was sleeping in her arms. The house was warm. Safe. For now. I thought about the concrete floor. The cardboard. The cold November wind. And I made myself a promise. Whatever this became, whatever it cost, I would not let my daughter go back to that life. Not for a second. My phone rang. Marcus Webb. I answered. Richard, we've got a problem. What now? The board challenge is moving faster than expected. How fast? They've scheduled an emergency meeting. When? Tomorrow morning. I looked at Ray. Who requested it? Marcus gave me the names. 3 directors. All connected, in one way or another, to people I trusted. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because finally, the picture was becoming clear. Marcus. Yes. Don't stop them. He went quiet. You want the meeting? I want them to believe they have the advantage. Why? Because tomorrow morning, I'm going to let them show us exactly how much of Sterling they've already compromised. I hung up. Ray looked at me. You're setting a trap. No. I looked toward my daughter. I'm giving them enough rope to tell us who else is holding it. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't waiting for the Belmont family to make their next move. I was ready for them to make it. The emergency board meeting began at 9 the next morning. I arrived at 8:45. I wanted everyone inside before I entered. The conference room was already occupied. 3 directors sat together on one side of the table. Patricia Henshaw, our longest-serving independent director, sat at the far end. Martin Cole was absent. That was interesting. The chairman of the board was supposed to be there. Instead, his chair was empty. I walked in and took my seat. Nobody spoke. Finally, Patricia looked at me. Richard, are you aware of the allegations being made against you? I am. And I think they're ridiculous. One of the directors, Charles Avery, slid a folder across the table. These are financial transfers. I know. Transfers from Sterling accounts. Yes. Into accounts controlled by entities associated with you. I opened the folder. The documents looked legitimate. That was the point. They were carefully manufactured. Dates. Account numbers. Transaction codes. Approvals. Everything. Almost perfect. Almost. I turned one page. Then another. Finally, I looked up. Who prepared these? Charles didn't answer. Who? Our outside counsel. Martin. He hesitated. Among others. I smiled slightly. Then we have our first problem. What problem? The transfer dates. I pointed to one document. This account didn't exist on this date. Charles frowned. I turned another page. And this authorization code wasn't implemented until 6 months later. Silence. Patricia leaned forward. You're saying the documents were fabricated? I'm saying whoever created them didn't understand our internal banking system well enough. Charles looked at the others. I closed the folder. But I'm not interested in proving that to you. He stared at me. Then what are you interested in? Finding out who gave them the information. I let the silence sit. Then I said, because whoever created these documents had access to internal Sterling records. That changed the room. Everyone understood the implication. This wasn't an attack from outside. Someone inside Sterling had provided confidential information. I looked at each director. Which means the question isn't whether someone is trying to remove me. It's who they're working for. No one spoke. Then Patricia asked, do you have evidence? Not enough. That was deliberate. I wanted them to believe we had less than we did. Charles leaned back. You understand that the board has a responsibility to protect shareholders. Absolutely. And if there is evidence of misconduct, there should be an investigation. Then you would agree to step aside temporarily? No. His expression hardened. Why not? Because I have done nothing wrong. And if the investigation clears you, I'll return to work. Patricia looked at me. Richard, something is happening here. I know. She lowered her voice. And I think you know more than you're saying. I met her eyes. I do. The meeting ended 40 minutes later. No vote. No suspension. No removal. For now. As everyone left, Patricia stayed behind. She waited until the door closed. Then she said, tell me what you found. I looked at her. Not here. She nodded. Tonight. Tonight. She stood. Richard. Yes. Whatever this is, be careful. I intend to be. She paused at the door. You don't look angry. I am. No. She shook her head. You look certain. Then she left. That word stayed with me. Certain. I wasn't certain. Not yet. But I was getting close. That afternoon Marcus sent me another file. Richard, you need to see this. I opened it. A list of shareholders. The 14 entities that had been quietly buying Sterling stock. Then Marcus highlighted one name. I stared at it. That's impossible. What? This company. I knew it. I'd seen the name before. Not in the financial records. In Clara's life. It was the investment company that had funded the Belmont family's charitable foundation. The same foundation hosting the gala in 10 days. I called Marcus. Traced the beneficial owners. Already did. And you're not going to like it. Tell me. One of the owners is Victoria Belmont. And the other? Marcus hesitated. Julian. I closed the file. They're not just buying the company. No. They're using the charity as part of the structure. Yes. I thought about the gala. 400 guests. Journalists. Politicians. Business leaders. A room full of people who believed the Belmonts represented old money, philanthropy, and respectability. A perfect place to control a story. Then Marcus said, Richard, there's one more thing. What? They've registered a new entity. When? Yesterday. Name. He sent it to me. I read it once. Then again. My stomach tightened. It was named after Clara. Not directly, but close enough that there could be no mistake. They were preparing for something. I called Ray. He arrived 20 minutes later. I showed him the documents. He studied them. They're accelerating. Why? Because they know the clock is running out. What clock? The one they don't know about. I understood. The federal investigation. Ray's contact. The documents. The recording. All of it was moving toward them. But there was still one problem. Evidence had to survive court. Suspicion wasn't enough. And I needed something that couldn't be explained away by expensive attorneys. That evening, Clara finally showed me the rest of the recording. We sat in the study. No television. No phones. Lily was asleep upstairs. Clara pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room. We don't need her permanently. Julian answered. Then what do we do with her? She leaves. Where? Somewhere no one will look. A pause. Then Julian said, what about the baby? Victoria's voice remained calm. If it's a boy, he stays. Julian hesitated. And if it's a girl? Silence. Then she goes with Clara. I felt Clara's hand tighten around mine. The recording continued. Julian asked, what about Richard? Victoria laughed softly. Richard will believe what Clara tells him. That sentence hurt. Not because it was true, because it revealed how deeply they had studied my daughter. They knew I trusted her. They knew she would never willingly expose herself to danger. They knew I would respect her privacy. They had turned my own love into a weapon. Then Victoria said something that changed everything. Once the Sterling position is secure, Julian will announce that Clara abandoned the marriage. Julian asked, and the divorce? No divorce. Silence. Why? Because a missing wife is inconvenient. An absent wife is useful. Clara stopped the recording. Her eyes were wet. They were going to erase me. I looked at her. They tried. No. She shook her head. They were going to make everyone believe I left. I nodded. Yes. She looked toward the hallway. Then Lily would have grown up hearing that her mother abandoned her. I reached across the desk. Clara took my hand. I couldn't let that happen. You didn't. I almost couldn't protect her. But you did. She shook her head. I was so scared, Dad. That was the first time she had said it without trying to hide it. I was terrified every night. I squeezed her hand. You don't have to be anymore. She looked at me. I know. Then the front door opened. Eleanor's voice came from the hallway. Richard. I stood. What? There are 2 men outside. Who are they? They say they're federal agents. I looked at Clara. She looked back at me. For 6 weeks, we'd been waiting for someone to believe her. Now someone had come. Ray walked into the room. He had already heard. Don't move anything, he said. Don't delete anything. Don't touch the recording. I wasn't planning to. He looked at Clara, then at me. It's happening. We walked into the front hall. 2 men stood beyond the door. One held up his credentials. Mr. Sterling? Yes. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm with the FBI. He looked past me. Is Clara Sterling here? Clara stepped forward. I'm Clara. The agent looked at her for a moment. Then his expression softened. Ms. Sterling, we'd like to talk to you. She looked at me. I nodded. Go ahead. She took 1 step forward, then stopped. Before we begin, she looked at Lily's room upstairs. Can I bring my daughter? The agent nodded. Of course. Clara went upstairs. And as I watched her disappear, I realized something. The Belmonts had spent months constructing a story in which Clara was powerless. A frightened wife. A missing woman. A problem to be managed. But they had forgotten one thing. Stories belong to the person who survives long enough to tell the truth. And Clara was still here. The FBI interview lasted nearly 3 hours. By the time Clara came downstairs, the sun was already beginning to disappear over the water. She looked exhausted, but different, lighter. Not because everything was over. It wasn't. But because, for the first time, the truth was no longer trapped inside her. Agent Daniel Harper met me in the hallway. Mr. Sterling. Yes. We need to talk privately. We went into the study. Ray followed. Harper closed the door. Your daughter's recording is significant. How significant? Very. He placed a folder on my desk. We've been tracking several of these entities for more than a year. Belmont. Belmont connected. He corrected himself carefully. There's a difference. What kind? We've suspected that the Belmont family was using legitimate businesses to conceal illicit financial activity. Money laundering? Among other things. He opened the folder. Your daughter's recording gives us something we've been missing. Their intent. I nodded. Exactly. Harper looked at Ray. You were involved in the original investigation? Yes. Then you know how difficult this is going to be. Ray smiled without humor. I know. Harper turned back to me. We're going to need every document you have. Everything. Everything. Corporate records. Bank records. Communications. Anything related to Clara's marriage. I nodded. You'll have it. He closed the folder. There's one more issue. What? They know we're looking. I wasn't surprised. How long? Probably already. Ray looked at him. How? Harper answered. Someone inside Sterling tipped them off. That confirmed what we suspected. Harper continued. We don't know who yet. Martin Cole. He's one possibility. He's already disappeared. Harper's eyes narrowed. Disappeared? His phone went dark yesterday. Do you know where he went? No. Harper stood. Then we'll find him. Before he left, he stopped at the door. Mr. Sterling. Yes. This case is bigger than your daughter. I know. No. He looked at me carefully. I don't think you do. He opened the door. We've been investigating financial movements involving the Belmonts, several private equity firms, and at least 2 public officials. He paused. Your company may be one part of something much larger. Then he left. I stood in the study for several seconds. Ray broke the silence. I told you. You did. But now we have the FBI. Yes. And that changes everything. I looked at him. Does it? Ray considered the question. It changes the rules. That evening, Patricia Walsh arrived at the house. She came alone. No staff. No security. No driver waiting outside. She carried a black leather folder under one arm. She had been a United States senator for years. But that night, she looked tired. Not politically tired. Personally tired. I owe you an explanation, she said. We sat in the study. She opened the folder. 6 years ago, I was approached by Victoria Belmont. What did she want? Nothing illegal. At first, she looked down. She had information about someone in my family. What kind? Something deeply private. Something that could have destroyed them. She nodded. She made it clear that the information would remain private if I stopped supporting an investigation. Into Belmont interests? Yes. And you did. Patricia closed her eyes. For 6 years, I've told myself I was protecting my family. She looked at me. I was really protecting myself. I said nothing. What changed? Your daughter. She opened another document. Because now I know what happens when powerful people decide that ordinary rules don't apply to them. She slid the document across the table. I want to cooperate with the Department of Justice. Will you testify? Yes. Against Victoria? Against everyone. Her voice was steady. Whatever it costs me. I nodded. Then we have a problem. What? They're going to come after you. I know. And they'll try to make you look compromised. I know. Are you ready? She gave me a tired smile. No. Then she straightened. But I'm done being afraid. That sentence stayed with me. Because I had heard the same thing from Clara. Different women. Different circumstances. Same realization. Fear only works when you believe you're alone. The next morning, the FBI began executing warrants. Banks. Storage facilities. Corporate offices. Private residences. The Belmont family's carefully constructed world began coming apart piece by piece. But Victoria Belmont didn't run. She did something more dangerous. She went public. At noon, a statement appeared from the Belmont family's public relations office. It accused me of manipulating my daughter's disappearance for financial gain. It described Clara as emotionally unstable. It suggested that I had manufactured evidence to attack a rival family. And it contained one sentence that made me furious. The Belmont family has deep concern for Clara Sterling's mental and emotional well-being. I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so predictable. They were trying to make her look unstable. Exactly as Clara had feared. The phone started ringing. News organizations. Business reporters. Board members. Investors. Everyone wanted a statement. I refused. Not yet. Because I knew something they didn't. The truth was coming. And when it came, I wanted it to arrive all at once. That afternoon, Daniel Harper called. We found something. What? Martin Cole. Where? Charlotte. Alive. Yes. Was he arrested? Not yet. What did you find? Harper hesitated. A storage unit. My stomach tightened. What was inside? Documents. How many? Several boxes. Anything useful? Very. How useful? We found original copies of Clara's prenup. I stood. The original? Yes. Then we found the version she signed. He paused. They're different. I closed my eyes. How different? Several clauses were removed. The ones protecting her? Exactly. There it was. Proof. Not interpretation. Not suspicion. The original agreement showed what Martin had drafted to protect Clara. The final agreement showed what he had allowed to be removed. And now we had the person who had paid him to do it. Victoria. Julian. The chain was becoming complete. But Harper wasn't finished. There's another document. What? A memorandum. From whom? Martin. To whom? Victoria Belmont. My hand tightened around the phone. What does it say? Harper's voice became quiet. It refers to Clara as an access point. I closed my eyes. Send me a copy. I can't. Why? Evidence. Understood. He paused. Richard. Yes. Prepare yourself. For what? Because this is going to become very public. He was right. By evening, every major financial news network was talking about the Sterling Belmont dispute. By nightfall, Clara's name was everywhere. But she refused to watch. She sat in the kitchen with Lily. Eleanor was making soup. The baby was lying on a blanket. Clara looked at me. Are they saying I'm unstable? Yes. She smiled sadly. Of course they are. Does it bother you? She thought about it. 6 weeks ago, it would have destroyed me. And now? She looked at Lily. Now I know who I am. That was the moment I realized my daughter had changed. Not into someone harder, someone stronger. There is a difference. Hard people stop feeling. Strong people learn that feeling doesn't make them weak. That night, Ray called me. Richard. Yes. I need you to come outside. I stepped onto the porch. He was standing beside his car. What happened? He looked toward the road. Someone followed me. Who? I don't know. Where? From town. Did they see the house? I don't think so. You're sure? Yes. He handed me a photograph. A black SUV. Same model Clara had described. That's the car. My stomach tightened. Are they watching us? Probably. What do we do? Ray looked at the house. We make them think we're afraid. I looked at him. And what do we actually do? He smiled. We prepare. I went inside. Clara was waiting in the hallway. She had heard enough. They're here, aren't they? I didn't lie. Possibly. She nodded. Then she looked at Lily. And something settled in her expression. We're not going back. No. Whatever happens. No. She looked at me. Then let's finish it. The next morning, I received an invitation. Not from the FBI. Not from the board. From the Belmont Foundation. The annual gala was 10 days away. The invitation described it as an evening celebrating resilience and new beginnings. At the bottom was a note. Julian Belmont would make a personal announcement regarding recent changes in his family circumstances. I read it again. Then I understood. They weren't waiting for the investigation. They were preparing their own version of the story. A story in which Clara had disappeared. A story in which Julian was the grieving husband. A story in which the Belmont family was the victim. And at the end of the evening, they would announce Julian's future. Possibly a new engagement. Possibly a new life. 400 people would hear it. 3 society journalists would report it. And once that version entered the public record, correcting it would be much harder. I took the invitation into the kitchen. Clara was holding Lily. She read it. Then looked at me. I know what they're going to do. What? They're going to announce that I'm dead. The room became very quiet. Then Clara looked down at her daughter. And when she looked back at me, there was no fear in her face. Only determination. I want to go. I stared at her. Clara, I want to walk into that room. That's dangerous. I know. They may try something. I know. Then why? She looked at Lily. Because they spent 6 weeks deciding I didn't exist. Her voice was calm. I want 400 people to watch me prove them wrong. I said nothing. She stepped closer. Dad. What? I don't want to hide anymore. I looked at my daughter. And I knew she was right. The Belmonts had spent months controlling the story. The next time they told it, Clara would be standing in the room. Alive. Holding her daughter. And ready to tell the truth. The days leading up to the gala passed differently than I expected. There was no dramatic confrontation. No midnight raid at the house. No threatening phone call. Instead, there was something quieter. Preparation. The FBI continued building its case. Marcus kept tracking the Sterling shares. Ray watched the people watching us. And Clara began putting her life back together one ordinary moment at a time. That mattered more than any of us admitted. On Wednesday morning, I found her in the kitchen with Eleanor. Lily was sitting in a bouncer beside them, kicking her tiny feet. Eleanor was holding a bowl of batter. Clara was laughing. Real laughter. What are you two doing? Eleanor looked at me. Teaching your daughter how to make pancakes. I thought you already taught her. Your wife taught her. Eleanor pointed the spoon at me. Apparently, I'm only the assistant. Clara smiled. Mom's recipe. I stopped. For a moment, I could almost see my wife standing there. Sunday mornings. Music playing softly. Clara sitting on the counter as a child. Flour on her cheek. Those memories had been buried under the past 6 weeks. Now they were coming back. Slowly. Carefully. Clara handed me a plate. Try one. I took a bite. Needs lemon. She stared at me. There is lemon. More lemon. She laughed. You've always done that. Your mother made them better. I know. Then she looked at me. I think she'd be happy. I knew what she meant. Not about the pancakes. About all of it. I nodded. She would. That afternoon, Clara slept for nearly 4 hours. She hadn't been sleeping properly since we found her. When she woke, she seemed embarrassed. I wasted half the day. You didn't waste anything. I should have been doing something. Your body needed sleep. She looked at me. You sound like Mom. Good. She smiled. That's the nicest thing you've said to me all week. On Thursday, the surgical consultation was confirmed. Dr. Patel had already sent Lily's records. The specialist reviewed the echocardiogram. The defect was small. The procedure was minimally invasive. The prognosis was excellent. But there was still one question. When? Dr. Patel had originally advised monitoring for several months. But given Lily's difficult circumstances and the strain on her heart, the specialist recommended proceeding sooner rather than later. The surgery was scheduled for the week after the gala. Clara took the news quietly. That night, she came into my study. Dad. Yes. Are you scared? I looked at her. About the surgery? Yes. Terrified. She nodded. Me too. She sat beside me. But I'm more scared of what almost happened. I understood. So am I. She leaned against my shoulder. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, Are you doing all this for me? What do you mean? The company. The investigation. The gala. Are you doing it because they hurt me? Yes. And because they attacked Sterling? I considered the question. Yes. She looked at me. Which one matters more? I answered honestly. You. She didn't say anything. I continued. The company can be rebuilt. Money can be replaced. Reputations can recover. But when I saw you standing in that grocery store, I stopped. I haven't forgotten what that felt like. Clara's eyes filled. I thought I'd never see you again. I know. I thought maybe you'd stop looking. That sentence hurt more than anything she'd said. I was looking. I know. I was just too late. She shook her head. You came. Eventually. That's what matters. Friday morning, Ray arrived with another update. The federal case is moving. How fast? Fast enough. That's not very specific. He smiled. Federal agents have begun interviews with several Belmont associates. Victoria? Not yet. Juliet? Not yet. Martin? Still cooperating. I looked at him. Cooperating. He's scared. Good. Ray sat down. He gave them a lot. How much? Enough to confirm the marriage was part of the acquisition strategy. I felt no satisfaction. Only sadness. Because there had been a time when I trusted Martin completely. Then Ray added, There's one thing you need to know. What? The Belmonts have been preparing for this. What do you mean? They have lawyers ready. Public relations teams. Political contacts. And they're going to fight. I nodded. I expected that. They're not going to admit anything. Then we'll let the evidence speak. Ray looked at me. There's one more issue. What? You're bored. I already knew. Some directors are still undecided. About me? About whether to support you. Why? Because the Belmonts have spent 18 months creating a financial narrative. What's the narrative? That Sterling is vulnerable. That you're too old to lead it. I smiled. That one's original. Ray ignored the joke. They're telling investors you're distracted by family problems. Meaning Clara. Yes. I looked toward the window. Then they'll have to explain why those family problems began when they started buying our shares. Ray nodded. Exactly. Saturday morning, Patricia Walsh called. Richard, Senator. The Judiciary Committee has agreed to review the referral. That's good. Very. She paused. But I need you to understand something. What? Once this becomes public at the level we're discussing, there will be no going back. I know. The Belmonts will attack you. I know. Your company. I know. Your family. I looked at Clara through the kitchen doorway. I know. Patricia was quiet. Then, good. The gala was the next night. By Saturday afternoon, Clara had decided what she would wear. A simple navy dress. Nothing expensive. Nothing that suggested she was trying to compete with the Belmonts. She wanted to walk into that ballroom looking like herself. Not a victim. Not a heiress. Not a symbol. Just Clara. Eleanor helped her with her hair. Lily slept nearby. I stood in the doorway. Clara looked at herself in the mirror. Do I look okay? You look like your mother. She smiled. That's enough. Then she turned. Do you think he'll be scared? Juliet. Yes. I thought about it. Probably. Good. She picked up Lily. I'm not doing this for revenge. I know. I just want the truth. That's why it'll work. At 7:30 that evening, Ray's security team arrived. The FBI knew our plan. They had people inside the hotel. Others outside. The objective was simple. Keep Clara safe. Allow her to enter. Allow the Belmonts to reveal themselves. And make sure no one could later claim that Clara's appearance had been staged. At 9:15, we were in the car. Clara sat beside me. Lily was asleep against her chest. She looked out the window at Manhattan. You know what's strange? What? I used to think I knew this city. You did. Now everything looks different. How? She watched the lights move across the glass. Like I survived it. I put my hand over hers. You did. The plaza appeared ahead. Gold lights. Black cars. Photographers. Guests arriving in evening clothes. Everything looked exactly as it was supposed to. That was the frightening part. A beautiful room could hide an ugly truth. The car stopped. Ray's voice came through the earpiece. Security is in position. I looked at Clara. Ready? She took a breath. Then looked down at Lily. Ready. We stepped out. The doors opened. For a moment, Clara stood beneath the lights. Then she walked inside. We were less than 30 seconds from changing the story the Belmont family had spent 6 weeks constructing. And somewhere inside that ballroom, Julian Belmont was standing at a podium preparing to announce that my daughter was gone. He had no idea she was about to walk through the door. Neither did Victoria. Neither did the 400 people who had come to hear the story they thought they already knew. I put my hand on the ballroom door. Clara stood beside me. She straightened her shoulders. One small movement. The same movement her mother used to make before entering a room she intended to own. I whispered, "Together." Clara looked at me. "Together." I opened the door. The first person who noticed Clara was a woman standing near the entrance with a champagne glass in her hand. She looked at Clara, then looked away, then looked back. Her face changed. The glass stopped halfway to her lips. A second later, the woman whispered something to the man beside her. He turned. Then another person turned. Then another. The reaction moved through the ballroom like a wave. Julian Belmont was still speaking at the podium. He had been talking about resilience, about family, about difficult seasons, about how some losses changed a person forever. Then he saw Clara. His voice stopped. Not gradually. Completely. The ballroom fell silent. Julian stared at her. Clara didn't move. Lily slept peacefully against her chest. I watched Julian's face. For the first time since I had met him, there was no polished expression, no careful smile, no practiced confidence, just shock. Behind him, Victoria Belmont slowly stood. She looked at Clara, then at me. Her face went pale. Clara started walking. One step, then another. She didn't hurry. She didn't need to. The room had already become hers. People moved aside without being asked. Some stared. Some covered their mouths. Others reached for their phones. A journalist near the back whispered, "Oh my God." Clara reached the front. Julian stepped away from the microphone. His eyes never left her. "Clara." She looked at him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she turned toward the audience. "My name is Clara Sterling." Her voice carried across the room. "And I am very much alive." The reaction was immediate. A gasp. Then another. Someone dropped a glass. Phones came up all around the ballroom. Julian stepped toward her. "Clara, we need to talk." She raised one hand. He stopped. "No." Her voice wasn't loud. "It didn't need to be. You've had 6 weeks to talk." Julian looked around. His face had lost all color. Clara continued, "I'd like everyone here to know that I did not disappear." She looked at the people in the room. "I was taken." A murmur moved through the crowd. Victoria stepped forward. "Clara, you're confused." Clara looked directly at her. "No, just one word." Then, "I was confused when I trusted you." Victoria's expression hardened. "You have no idea what you're saying." Clara reached inside her handbag. I felt my entire body tighten. She pulled out the small prepaid phone, the one she had carried out of that abandoned building, the one containing the recording. She held it up. "I have something I'd like everyone here to hear." Victoria's eyes changed. That was the moment she knew. The recording existed, and she knew exactly what it contained. "Turn that off," Julian said. Clara didn't even look at him. She pressed play. The ballroom filled with Victoria's voice. Calm, precise, controlled. The same voice she had used at countless dinners and charity events. But now the words were different. The recording described Clara as a problem, a liability, someone who knew too much. Then came Julian's voice. Quiet, uncertain, agreeing. The room became utterly still. Nobody whispered. Nobody moved. The recording continued. Then Victoria's voice said the sentence that changed everything. "We can't allow her to return to Sterling." A woman near the front table covered her mouth. Julian closed his eyes. The recording continued. Then came the discussion about Clara's disappearance, about controlling the narrative, about making sure nobody knew where she was. And then the final part. The part where they discussed what would happen if Clara refused to cooperate. The recording stopped. Silence. For several seconds, no one knew what to do. Then Patricia Walsh stood. She had been sitting near the rear of the ballroom. She didn't speak. She simply looked at the journalists, then at the federal agents entering through the side doors. That was enough. The room erupted. Questions came from every direction. Senator, are the allegations true? Mr. Belmont, did you know about this? Victoria, are you under investigation? Where was Clara? Who was involved? Is this connected to Sterling Corp? Federal agents moved toward the front. Victoria stood frozen. Julian looked at me. For a brief second, I saw the young man I had once believed was worthy of my daughter. Then I saw what he had become. He walked toward me. You did this. I looked at him. No. His jaw tightened. You ruined everything. I answered quietly. No, Julian. I pointed toward Clara. You did. He looked at her, and something in his face collapsed. Clara stood there holding Lily. Not shaking. Not crying. Not begging. Just standing. Alive. The agents approached Julian. He didn't resist. Victoria was different. She demanded attorneys. She demanded identification. She demanded to know under whose authority they were acting. One agent calmly handed her a document. She read it, then read it again. Her hands began to shake. That was the first time I had ever seen Victoria Belmont afraid. Not angry. Afraid. She looked at me. Richard. I didn't answer. You don't understand what you've done. I finally spoke. I understand exactly what I've done. She stared at me. I protected my daughter. The agents escorted her away. Julian followed. As he passed Clara, he stopped. For 1 second, their eyes met. He whispered, I'm sorry. Clara looked at him. I don't believe you. Then he was gone. The ballroom exploded into noise. Reporters rushed toward Clara. Security moved between them. I stepped forward. She'll make a statement when she's ready. Clara touched my arm. No. I looked at her. I want to say one thing. She turned toward the room. My daughter and I are safe. She paused. And I want every woman and every man in this room to understand something. The room quieted. If someone tells you that you have to disappear to protect the people you love, that isn't protection. She looked toward the doors where Julian and Victoria had disappeared. That's control. Then she turned away. That was all. We left. No dramatic speech. No victory celebration. Just the four of us walking out of the ballroom. Me, Clara, Lily, and Ray. Outside, the December air hit us. Clara stopped on the sidewalk. She looked up at the hotel. Then she exhaled. It's over. I looked at her. Not completely. She smiled. I know. But the worst part is. She nodded. Yes. We got into the car. For the first time in 6 weeks, Clara fell asleep before we reached the bridge. Lily slept beside her. I watched my daughter through the rearview mirror. And for the first time since Myrtle Cove, I allowed myself to believe that maybe we were going to be okay. But there was still one thing I hadn't told her. Something I had been carrying for 2 weeks. Something I had delayed because I was afraid it would destroy the peace we had finally found. The next morning, I sat across from Dr. Patel. He looked at me carefully. Richard, what? We need to talk about Lily. My stomach tightened. He opened the medical file. The echocardiogram showed something we need to address. I stared at him. What kind of something? A small opening in the wall between the lower chambers of her heart. I didn't understand at first. He explained it. A ventricular septal defect. A VSD. Small. Congenital. Often something that closes naturally. But Lily's particular defect needed monitoring. And possibly a procedure. Is she in danger? Not immediately. I let out a breath. But we can't ignore it. I looked through the glass at the nursery. Lily was sleeping. Completely peaceful. Completely unaware that the adults around her were once again afraid. How long do we have? She needs close monitoring. How close? We'll schedule a specialist consultation. When? Immediately. I sat there. For 6 weeks, I had been fighting one crisis after another. And suddenly, there was another one. Except this time, there was no enemy to confront. No company to investigate. No document to uncover. No person to expose. Just a tiny heart. And nothing in my financial career had prepared me for that kind of fear. When I returned home, Clara was in the kitchen. She smiled. You're back. I nodded. Yes. She looked at my face. The smile disappeared. What happened? I sat down. Clara. She immediately knew. Is it Lily? I took her hand. We found something during her examination. Her fingers tightened around mine. What? I looked directly into her eyes. Her heart has a small defect. She didn't speak. I explained everything Dr. Patel had told me. She listened. Then she looked toward Lily. For a moment, I thought she might break. Instead, she stood, walked over to the baby, placed her hand gently against Lily's chest. Then she whispered, "You're okay." Her voice shook. "But Mommy's right here." I watched my daughter. The woman who had survived a month on cardboard. The woman who had faced the Belmonts in front of 400 people. Now she was standing beside her baby, trying to be brave for a reason that had nothing to do with herself. I walked over and put my hand on her shoulder. "We're going to handle this." She nodded. "Together?" I squeezed her shoulder. "Always." 3 days later, Lily's specialist appointment was confirmed. The prognosis was excellent. The procedure, if necessary, had a very high success rate. But we wouldn't know until the specialist examined her. Clara and I sat in the waiting room. She held Lily. I held Clara's bag. Neither of us spoke much. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. "Who is it?" She frowned. "Patricia." She answered. "Hello." I watched her expression change. She listened, then looked at me. "What?" A pause. "You're sure?" Another pause. "Okay." She ended the call. I leaned forward. "What happened?" She looked at me. Patricia said the federal indictment has been confirmed. I exhaled. Victoria Belmont. Julian Belmont. Martin Cole. The people who had tried to control Clara's life. Their world was collapsing. But Clara didn't smile. She looked down at Lily. "I don't care." I understood. The fight was no longer about them. It was about what came next. And the next morning, we took Lily to the hospital. The hospital hallway was too bright. That was the first thing I remember. Not the machines. Not the nurses. Not the waiting room. The lights. Bright enough to make everything look unreal. Clara sat beside me with Lily asleep against her chest. Every few minutes, she looked down to make sure the baby was breathing. I didn't tell her to stop. I understood. When you've spent weeks believing the worst can happen without warning, peace becomes something you have to relearn. A nurse finally came through the doors. "Miss Sterling?" Clara stood immediately. "Yes." "The doctor is ready." She looked at me. I stood. We followed. The specialist examined Lily for nearly an hour. Then came the echocardiogram. Then another examination. Finally, the doctor sat across from us. "I want to start by telling you something reassuring." Clara's shoulders dropped slightly. "Your daughter is doing very well." I breathed again. "The defect is small. Her heart is functioning normally." Clara closed her eyes. The doctor continued. "Given her age and the location of the VSD, we have two options. We can continue monitoring it and see whether it closes naturally, or we can intervene." Clara looked at me. "What would you recommend?" "Given everything you've been through, I don't want to create unnecessary risk. I recommend monitoring for now." "So no surgery?" "Not today." Clara nodded. "Thank you." The doctor smiled. "Most important thing now is stability. Nutrition, rest, regular follow-ups. Nutrition, rest." Two words that sounded almost painfully ordinary after everything that had happened. We left the hospital with Lily sleeping in her carrier. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm. Clara stood on the sidewalk. She looked at the baby, then at me. "She's okay." "Yes. For now." "For now." She smiled. "I can live with that." We drove back to the house. And for the first time in months, there was no immediate emergency waiting for us. The Belmont investigation continued without us. The federal case moved forward. Martin Cole entered a cooperation agreement. Several Belmont-connected companies were frozen. The board at Sterling Corp voted unanimously to reject the takeover attempt. The 14 shell companies that had quietly accumulated shares were forced to disclose their ownership. The number that had looked invisible for 18 months suddenly appeared on every financial analyst's screen. 11.3%. Enough to cause damage. Not enough to control Sterling. The strategy had failed, but the consequences were enormous. Julian Belmont was indicted. Victoria Belmont was indicted. Martin Cole became a cooperating witness. And Patricia Walsh publicly acknowledged her previous contact with the Belmont family. She didn't try to make herself look innocent. She told the truth. That mattered, because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do after making a mistake is refuse to hide the mistake. 6 months later, the case would become one of the largest financial investigations in the region. But that night, None of us cared about the headlines. Eleanor made soup. Clara fed Lily. I sat at the kitchen table. The house was warm. The lights were low. And nobody was running. Nobody was hiding. Nobody was counting crackers. I looked at Clara. Do you remember Henderson's Market? She smiled. I try not to. I'll never forget it. I know. You were standing there with one can of formula. I remember. And your card declined. She laughed softly. It was humiliating. It wasn't. It felt humiliating. I know. She looked at me. I thought you'd be disappointed. That stopped me. Why would I be disappointed? Because I was supposed to have a perfect life. I stared at her. Who told you that? She shrugged. Everyone. I shook my head. No. I reached across the table. Your life doesn't have to be perfect for me to be proud of you. Her eyes filled. You survived. She looked down. Not alone. No. I smiled. Not anymore. Lily made a small sound from Eleanor's arms. Eleanor looked down. Someone wants attention. Clara laughed. She gets that from her grandfather. I don't know what you're talking about. You've been holding her for 20 minutes. She's comfortable. You're afraid to put her down. I looked at Lily. That is an unproven allegation. Clara laughed again. And that sound meant more to me than any board vote or federal indictment ever could. Because 6 weeks earlier, I had found my daughter in a grocery store looking like someone the world had forgotten. Now she was laughing in my kitchen, holding her daughter, planning tomorrow. That was the victory, not the Belmonts losing, not Sterling surviving, not the headlines. Tomorrow. A few weeks later, Clara moved permanently into the coastal house. She didn't ask. I didn't offer. It simply happened. Her life had been stripped down to almost nothing. So we built it again. Slowly. She started consulting with Sterling's legal team, not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand exactly what had happened. She also began taking classes in financial compliance. I want to know how they did it, she told me. Why? So I can recognize it if I ever see it again. That sounded like Clara. Not revenge. Preparation. Lily grew. She gained weight. She became stronger. Her heart continued to be monitored. At 6 months, the VSD was smaller. At 9 months, smaller still. The specialist told us there was a very good chance it would close completely without intervention. Clara cried when she heard that. Not dramatically, just a few tears. Then she laughed. I think she's stubborn. I looked at her. She comes by it honestly. One evening, nearly a year after I found Clara at Henderson's Market, we were sitting on the porch. The ocean was dark beyond the railing. Lily was asleep inside. Clara held a mug of tea. You know what I think about sometimes? What? That night. The grocery store? Yes. She looked out toward the water. If you hadn't gone in there. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I knew. If you had gone to a different store. If you'd stayed at the hotel. If your analyst hadn't found Coastal Meridian. If Ray hadn't been watching. If the cashier had been 10 seconds slower. 100 small decisions. 100 moments that could have gone differently. I said, don't do that. What? Don't build a different life out of what-ifs. She smiled. You sound like Mom again. Maybe I'm finally getting good at it. She looked at me. I used to think love meant protecting someone from everything. I waited. Now I think it means making sure they know they aren't alone when something happens. I nodded. That's closer. She leaned back. Do you regret anything? I knew immediately what she meant. Yes. Finding me too late? Yes. She looked down. Don't. I do. You can't. I can. She shook her head. You found me. After 6 weeks. But you found me. I looked at her. And you were still fighting. She smiled. I had Lily. No. I shook my head. You had yourself. She didn't answer. I continued. That night in the grocery store, you were exhausted. Hungry. Terrified. But you still had the strength to protect your daughter. I looked toward the house. That wasn't Lily protecting you. That was you. She looked at me for a long time. Then she reached over and took my hand. Maybe. The ocean moved in the darkness. A slow, steady rhythm. The kind of sound that reminds you the world continues whether you're ready for it or not. I thought about the lesson I had carried from that year. Not just about money. Not about corporations. Not about betrayal. About attention. About the things we notice when we finally stop telling ourselves everything is fine. I had spent decades believing that being a good father meant giving my daughter enough freedom to live her own life. And that was true. But freedom and indifference are not the same thing. There is a difference between respecting someone's independence and ignoring the feeling in your gut that something is wrong. I learned that too late. But I learned it. And perhaps that is what second chances are for. Not to erase the mistake. To make sure the mistake means something. Inside the house, Lily began to fuss. Clara smiled. Your granddaughter is calling. I stood. I'll get her. You don't have to. I know. I walked inside. Lily was awake in her crib. She looked at me, then smiled. That smile still gets me. Every time. I picked her up. She wrapped her tiny fingers around mine. And I thought about that first night. The cold concrete. The cardboard. The empty formula can. The woman at the register who had been too proud to ask for help because she had learned that help sometimes came with a price. And I thought about the man I had been before that night. Successful. Independent. Careful. A man who believed evidence came before action. But love doesn't always give you evidence. Sometimes it gives you a feeling. Sometimes it gives you a question. Sometimes it gives you a daughter standing under fluorescent lights with a hungry baby in her arms. And sometimes that's enough. I carried Lily into the kitchen. Clara looked up. She's okay. She's perfect. Clara smiled. Then she opened her arms. I handed Lily to her. For a moment, the three of us stood together. No lawyers. No investigators. No cameras. No enemies. Just a father, a daughter, and a little girl who had no idea how much had been done to make sure she could sleep safely that night. I looked at Clara. You know something? What? Your mother would have loved this. Clara looked down at Lily. Yeah. Then she smiled. I think she does. I nodded. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. I don't know. But I know this. There are moments in life when everything you thought mattered becomes very small. Money, power, reputation, control. And there are moments when something as simple as a baby's hand closing around your finger makes everything else disappear. That was my moment. And if I could go back to that hotel room in Myrtle Cove, back to the night when the quiet felt wrong, I would tell the man standing at that window one thing. Don't wait. Don't wait until you have every document. Don't wait until the bank records line up. Don't wait until somebody admits what they've done. If the people you love are involved, pay attention. Ask. Call. Show up. Because sometimes love isn't the feeling that tells you everything will be okay. Sometimes love is the voice that says, something isn't right. Go find her. And when you do find her, don't let go. And if this story reminded you that sometimes the people we love need us to pay a little closer attention, then don't let that feeling end here. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more emotional, suspenseful stories like this one. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a moment when your instincts told you that something wasn't right, and you decided to listen? Share your story below. You never know who might need to hear it. Until next time, take care of the people you love, pay attention when something feels wrong, and remember, sometimes showing up at the right moment can change an entire life.